icked me out. It icked me the freak out, and I can't. Ooh. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chia, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the series that has the worst endings in my opinion. I'm not only going to be talking about them, but I'm also going to be ranking them to least terrible endings to the worst endings, so if that makes sense. Basically, I will start off with the book series that I think had a terrible ending, but it wasn't as bad compared to the other ones that I'm going to be going up the list for. I'm going to go over a few disclaimers. Again, this is my opinion. This is what I thought had the terrible endings, and if you love these series, I am so happy for you because I love them too. It's just that they were so disappointing for me. If I do anything negative feedback for these series, please feel free to click out of the video. Protect your peace. I will be doing timestamps, so feel free to click around to look for the series that you want to skip in case you don't want to hear me talking about them. And also, I will not be going over spoilers just in case, again, if you haven't read them yet. I will be going as vague as possible with these endings, so be aware of that. But let's get started. So the one that had probably the least worst ending in my opinion was probably the Crimson Moth Duology. First book was absolutely perfect. This follows two characters actually. One is Rune, she is a witch, and also it follows Gideon, and he's a witch hunter. So it's a cat and mouse game. Rune takes up the mantle of being the Crimson Moth. She goes around being a nighttime vigilante, basically freeing all the witches that are captured by the witch hunters. And Gideon has a suspicion that Rune is the Crimson Moth, so he goes after her, and then they pretend to have a fake dating relationship. He has the motivation of trying to prove that she is a Crimson Moth, and then Rune is trying to get into Gideon's good graces so that he doesn't go after her as the Crimson Moth. So it's like a cat and mouse game, and there was a huge cliffhanger ending, and I absolutely loved this series, and I was dying for the second one. And then Rebel Witch came out, and that was so disappointing. I thought that the ending was so kind of boring and repetitive, and also I thought the magic system was so cool in the first book. The witches basically use blood magic as their means to cast these spells, and the way Rune does it is very ingenious / gross at the same time. I wanted to know more about that magic system, and the second book did not go over it whatsoever. There was just oh, this is a spell and that's how it is. That's it. No deeper meaning behind it. It was more about Rune and Gideon's relationship, and even then it was very, very repetitive compared to the first one. So much back and forth between them, and I was getting so upset at it because of the development that it was going. This was such a huge build up for the ending to be so wrapped up really quickly in the last 10% of the book, and I did not like the ending whatsoever. This was executed really poorly, and I wish it was done better, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars when I first read it, but now thinking about it, I might want to lower it to a 3.5. And next is a beloved YA series, and that is a Shadow and Bone trilogy. I had an okay time with the series overall. I didn't like it as much as the Six of Crows duology. I think that is by far superior. I especially like to recommend people to read this first before jumping into the Six of Crows duology, because Six of Crows, it will explain the magic system a little bit, but not as much as Shadow and Bone. Especially if you're a beginner to fantasy, before reading Six of Crows, jump into Shadow of Bones first, because they do fully explain the magic system and the Grishaverse in this series. I didn't necessarily like Lena or her love interest. In fact, I kind of found him really boring, and I didn't really like her as a female main character, and it was just very YA to me, which makes sense because it's YA. I did really like the Darkness, or the Darkling? Is that what his name is? Yeah, the Darkling. He's the one who discovers basically that Alina has powers. And so Alina is a cartographer. She works for their local army, and then Mal is her best friend since they were kids. And I love the universe, I love the magic system, but the way this ended with all that big build up, when I saw it online when people were talking about it, that it was a perfect ending for what the characters needed, I just thought it was BS. I did not like how it was ended. The particular trope that was used in the end of this fantasy series is not a trope I like whatsoever. I think it's pointless. Why would you want us to build up and also strengthen this character for this sort of type of ending? But I just don't think this is worth it. The ending just made it terrible for me, and also it just became not what I wanted to see at the end of this whole entire big war with the Darkling. And also I was hoping that the love story would go to some other direction, but but I just felt like they were so boring to me, and I just didn't feel the need to ever reread this series. And sometimes I wonder if I should unhaul it, especially since, like I said, I don't feel like I should reread it, and I did not like the ending or the characters, but I do love it for what the world and the magic system is, for the Grishaverse. I love the Grishaverse. I think it's such a beautiful magic system and complex. It's very unique, and it doesn't compare to a lot of magic systems out there. I just wish this was executed better. The next one I'm going to talk about, I don't have physically, is Serpent and the Wings of Night Duet. It's basically like called the Crowns of Nyaxia duets, and there's like currently, I think there's like 4 books out right now. Each duet follows a different couple. This one follows Oriah and what's his name? Oriah and Rain. Oriah goes through these like obstacles and trials where basically at the end of the obstacle and trials, she gets to make a wish to one of the goddesses, and her whole entire wish is to become like a vampire, because she's always been this like, I don't know, weak human, because she's grown up with a bunch of vampires since she was adopted by a vampire, and she's always had to fear for her life the whole entire time she was growing up, and also she doesn't want to feel weak anymore compared to them. And Rain is a vampire. He's a part of another like faction. They end up meeting during the trials, and Rain ends up basically forming a alliance with Oriah so that they can help each other during this whole entire like trial. And of course they end up falling in love, and the ending of the first book, I was just flabbergasted, because I was just like, what? The way it started out, the second book, which was Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, the way it started out, basically like it felt like everything that the characters developed and everything from the first book completely like got ruined because of this whole entire like revelation at the end. It was so bad. And also I found Oriah so annoying this whole second book. The first book I was fine with her. I thought she was like an okay female main character, but the second book, oh my gosh, did I find her so annoying. She basically like was trying to get out of the situation that she was in and trying to do it in the worst ways, and also I felt like she was kind of whiny the whole entire time. It was just terrible. And then Rain really pissed me off in the second book. Like, what was that? What the heck was that? It was so good, the first book. I binged the first book. In the second book, I was just like, what the heck is going on? It kind of made me hesitate on continuing on with the rest of the duets, because the second duet is following one of Rain's like friends, his like best friend. She goes off on her own little adventure, and apparently all the people who loved the first duet hated the second duet because it was just terribly written, and then the character development we wanted for the friend just didn't happen whatsoever, and I'm so hesitant on continuing it. The last duet is supposed to start coming out in fall, I think. I don't know who that is following. Each book is supposed to follow one of the different factions, so I don't know. Again, I do not know if I will continue with the series or not, especially with all the bad reviews I heard of the duet and how much I disliked the first duet in the first place. And then next in that ranking, the series is like loved by many. I love it too because I binged it. I inhaled all of the books. Well, technically the main books of the series, but I just thought certain books was so unnecessary, and that is Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. This is more of like a, I guess you could say, dystopian fantasy kind of book, because we start off with Juliet being in this like sort of institution, and she is going crazy. We see her because it's her POV, and then there's these like rambling on, like there are points where it's her POV, and then there's like little sentences like this where it's just crossed out. So it's basically like her mind going insane because she's in here, because there's this like ability that she's always had that makes her harm people, and I'm not going to say any more than that. Then she is rescued by somebody she knew from her life before she got like institutionalized, and he ends up rescuing her and taking her to this group of X-Men, but not X-Men. They all have abilities. It's like sci-fi abilities and stuff like that. And she meets them and becomes friends with them, and the famous Aaron Warner is from this book too, and I love Aaron Warner. The romance was such a giggling, kicking my feet kind of thing, and I did like the different situations that they were in. I think this whole entire series should have ended with like the third book. I thought the third book was great, and then as it continued on, there were situations where it just got worse and worse. And the last book, oh my gosh, the last book was terrible. I just thought that whole entire situation was so unnecessary. Like, what? The different situations she had to go through with the enemy, that was so terrible. I thought it was going in a direction that I didn't want it to go to. That was like one of the worst books I've read for like an ending ever, and I thought that it just didn't need it. And in my mind, I think the plot ended in the third book, because everything was so good in the first three, and then the last three, the plot was just so everywhere. It was convoluted, and I'm just like, we did not need that unnecessary plot device at all. I think, if I remember correctly, when I first read this, I heard that it was supposed to be a trilogy, and it ended on that trilogy, and then she decided to come out with 3 more books. And also, there's so many novellas in this whole entire series, and apparently the novellas that I haven't read, I just read the 6 main books. It's just literally parts of the story being retold by different POVs. I do love the characters in this book. I love Aaron Warner. He used to be a top book boyfriend before when I first read this, but after that I read so many better book boyfriends. And also Kenji. I love Kenji and his here too. He's like the perfect best friend for Juliet. I thought the ending was terrible, and I wish it just ended at the 3rd one. And in the trilogy that I'm going to talk about now, disclaimer, I love this series, don't get me wrong, but the ending was just not what I wanted. I thought the ending was absolutely disappointing. And also, this whole entire world is one of my top favorite worlds of all time, and this one is the Last Hour series. First 2 was great. I think I gave the first one a 4 stars, and then the second one 5 stars. And the third one, oh my gosh, it was so long. First of all, it dragged so much, and also the ending yearning that we had in the first 2 books. What happened in the 3rd book? I don't know why she wrote it that way. It was quick, a lot happened, and a lot didn't happen at the same time. Especially for our male main character and our female main character, the romance that I wanted with the ending of it was just so bad. Infernal Devices had a perfect ending. The epilogue, I still cry by it to this day. It's still heart-achingly beautiful. This one was just absolute mess. I think it just focused too much on certain things instead of focusing on what I wanted them to focus on, the romance between our male main character and our female main character. I was hoping that they would have a beautiful end, and they kind of did, yes, but the way it was brought on was just executed poorly. I thought that the big conflict, whatever you want to call it, that they were going through wrapped up so quickly for the build-up that it was, and also for the fact that it was almost 800 pages, and it dragged on that much for it to have a quick ending and also not focus on our characters at all was just so disappointing to me. And I thought that I would be okay with the ending. I was sitting on it for a good while, and I was so disappointed by it, and I did give it a 4 stars, and I'm gonna stick with the 4 stars. I just wish this was done better because it was just so long for no reason, for no focus on any of our characters. And then speaking of another book series that had no focus in the characters that I wanted to focus on was Once Upon a Broken Heart. If you read Caraval, there's a character from there named Jax. He's a fate. And this one follows his story with Evangeline. She had her heart broken because the love of her life is marrying her stepsister. And so on the day that they're supposed to marry, she goes to the fates and basically wishes that they would stop the wedding or something like that. And then Jack shows up. He's a kind of a villain in Caraval, and he comes to here. And then he barters with her and says, I will stop this wedding if you give me 3 kisses at any time and anywhere and with anybody I tell you to. So of course she says yes, because she's it's just 3 kisses. Is it going to be a big deal for me? And they slowly start falling in love with each other, and it's so whimsical and fairy tale filled. And Stephanie Garber is one of my favorite authors. She has such a beautiful way of writing a story where it's just like I said, very fairy tale. I love the first 2 books. The second one was by far my favorite, The Ballad of Never After. The cliffhanger at that book, wow. The 3rd book, oh my gosh, that was absolute trash. I finished that book in 1 day because I was highly anticipating it. Thankfully, I didn't wait long after the cliffhanger Ballad of Never After. But oh my gosh, I wish we did wait longer for her to have honed into the ending so much more. First off, we did not get a lot of time with Jax and Eva. We were talking about different characters that were introduced, because what I heard is that she is trying to write a whole entire universe with the different characters, and the fact is that she introduced these characters, yet we still were in the middle of Eva and Jack's story. Why would she start introducing these new characters for this universe and not focus on concluding their ending? Granted, I did love their ending, but I felt like we didn't get any of Jax in this. And also there's a POV in here that I hated, that I can't believe she included. The fact that she didn't include a lot of Jax's POV in this, I will never forgive. Because the fact that we did not get any of our favorite characters in here as much as I wanted, and we were focusing on more of fleshing out different characters the main plot was not even about. But I think we're gonna have more time with Jax and Eva this coming November, I think. Because she did just announce that she's coming out with the novella that continues on with their story. It's called A Mirror of Infinite Endings. I'll pop it up on the screen. And I'm hoping it makes up for this book because I know I'm not the only one who's disappointed by the ending of the series. Like, so many people despise A Curse for True Love. It was like one of the worst endings I've ever read because, again, why would you focus on other characters when we're clearly here for Eva and Jax? It makes no sense to me, and I'm still really mad about it till this day, if you couldn't tell. Okay, next is Kingdom of Lies by Saskia Stark. This is a 4-book series. We follow a character named Priska, and they are born with magical powers, and they are given to the gods during a certain time when they're babies, and when they're 25, they're allowed to have their powers back. She, unfortunately, still has her powers, and anybody who's caught to still have their powers before they're given back to them is, like, jailed, and also their families executed right in front of them. And so, unfortunately, one day her powers get revealed, and so she has to run away. And so she goes running off and runs into some mercenaries led by Lorien, and so they end up like helping each other out with this group, and she ends up traveling with them. First 2 books was like my favorite out of all 4 of them. The first book was like a introduction to our characters, and also it gave me vibes of when Lorcan and Alid were traveling, if you read Throne of Glass. And so she is like coming to basically like hone in on her powers, and so she travels on with Lorien, and then they end up finding more about her past and his past, and there's this huge revelation at the end of the first book. And then in the second book, we learn more about that revelation. We learn more about her childhood. And now they have to basically form this alliance with different people in this country to fight against the king who is trying to take powers from people. The last 2 books were so terrible. They were boring, but the last book was the worst. The love story just like went really weird after the first and second book. The first book, I wasn't really as invested with their romance because it did get really lusty very fast. The whole entire ending for the evil villain came on too fast. Like, what was that? Again, another series that had a huge build up with their evil beings just got like cleaned up way too fast, and I felt like Priska took 10 steps back. Not even 10 steps, 100 steps back. She had so much character development, and then it just stopped in the last book, and she just became like how she was at the beginning of the book, and even worse than that because she became very fearful, which is understandable for what happened in the last book, but yet I just don't like when characters regress their character development, because what was the point of all of that? And overall, I just don't recommend this whole entire series, especially if you're looking for something that is a little bit more endearing with the main characters. I found that I was more interested in the side characters over the main characters, so that was Kingdom of Lies. Now, the next one is, it ended last year, April of last year, and that was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This whole entire series just kept going down the drain for me. The first book I actually really liked. I liked the relationship between Peyton and Kai. Granted, a lot of the plot points and also a lot of the things with the trials and everything was very recycled. The second book, I hated the second book. That one had such like the worst plot. They were literally chasing each other back and forth across the desert. The thing I loved the most about the first book was that Kai had some like amazing yearning, and the second book he was still like yearning and stuff, but I wanted more from the plot. I wanted more from character development. And the third one, Fearless, it was so long for no reason. And also I felt like, what happened to our main character in that book? He literally was just there to throw in some pretty words, disappeared, and then Peyton was just there to fix whatever it is that she needs to fix. And I just thought she was making the terrible decisions. I thought she was making such terrible choices that were so selfish, especially with like the way Kai was treating her and everything, and also the back and forth between the characters that she had when she was trying to make a decision. And also the ending for a certain character was terribly executed. I thought it was just a cop-out for, instead of like giving them a well done ending, they gave them this cop-out instead. And I was so disappointed with how everything turned out, and I just felt like I wasted my whole entire time with this series. And like, I only wanted to read that last book, Fearless, because I just wanted to finish the trilogy, and I was also curious to see how she was going to end everything, especially with the cliffhanger from the second book. I don't think it was worth it at all. Very definitely romance focused. Like, the plot was in there, the character development was not there. Like, this was so bad, and I don't even know if I want to hold on to these like editions. This is the Waterstone edition. It's so pretty too, because look at it. So I might just keep the first 2 and get rid of Fearless in all honesty, because the Fearless is not a Waterstones edition. It kind of sold out before I could get my hands on it. This had one of the worst endings I've ever read in my life. In fact, the whole entire series is kind of terrible, to be honest, so I feel like you should just not waste your time and pick up other book series instead. And then this one is one of my most disappointing ones, because I'm so sad with how this duology duology ended, and that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I think the duology is called Letters of Enchantment duology. So I loved Divine Rivals. The first book made me cry. I gave it 5 stars too. The romance between Roman and Iris was so beautifully done, and this was my first time ever reading Rebecca Ross's writing. I think she has such beautiful lyrical writing. It's one of my favorites to read. And then this one was so amazing because, again, the beautiful love story, and Iris and Roman are like rivals, I guess you could say, in this newspaper company. They are trying to vie for the same position. I guess like Iris has a brother, Forrest, who has gone off to war. Basically, the whole entire world is ran by these like gods, and these two gods are like fighting with each other, so they're using the humans to basically like fight each other, and her brother ended up getting enlisted and fighting in the war, and she hasn't seen him in a couple of years and hasn't heard from him or anything like that. So she decides to write a letter, but she doesn't know where to write it to, so after she's done writing that letter, she puts it in the wardrobe, and the next day she finds out that the letter is gone, and then instead there's a letter responding back to her, and then they have like these magical typewriters, and they just talk back and forth to each other, and then you find out that it's Roman who's writing the other letters. It's so good. And also there's like discussions of like what happens like when you're a correspondent during wartime, and especially in the front lines, and there are very, very sad things that happen in this book. So Ruthless Vows came out, and I was so disappointed. In that book, she tried to focus more on the fantasy aspect of it, which I feel like was like the terrible decision to do. It wasn't necessarily like full-on fantasy. I think it was just a romance set in a fantasy world. The romance kind of like was very barely touched upon, and I think that was like the worst thing about it, was that we didn't really get time with Roman and Iris. I think a lot of these have like I'm noticing that common problems is that they kind of change up the things that I loved about the first like few books or whatever. Like they start focusing on other things, and I'm just not connected to what the author chooses to focus on more. And yeah, the second book was more fantasy forward. It started like focusing more on like the gods and how they were warring with each other and like the war. And there's like a trope in here that I really hate is used a lot in other fantasy books, and it really bores me to death when this trope is used. And so I was so sad about Ruthless Vows. I can't believe that's how it ended. Granted, they did have a good ending, but I just didn't like how it was executed. And then we're almost done. We have like 4 more. This is one of like the 4 worst endings, I think, was the Blood and Steel, Legends of Thezmarr. The 4th book was terrible. This is my journey with like the Legends of Thezmarr. I really liked the first one. I thought we get introduced to a really strong female character. We follow a character named Althea. She basically wants to join like the Legends of Thezmarr, the War Swords, and she's not allowed because women are not allowed to fight in this world. But she ends up finding a way to plead her case to the king, and the king ends up like allowing her to train with them as like a temporary basis to see how she does. And somebody named Wilder Hawthorne gets like assigned to help her out and basically to train her. I guess you could say it's enemies to lovers, but not really. Reluctant allies, I think that's more what it is. And so we follow them as they journey along for her to become a war sword, and also they start falling in love. The first book I really liked. The second book I didn't really enjoy as much because there was just too much spicy scenes in it. I think it was more spicy scenes over plot. And the third book was my favorite. That's the only one I gave it 5 stars to because I liked how our characters developed in it, and also the whole entire like plot development that we had. I thought it was good. I thought we were gonna end up having a strong ending. And then the 4th book came out, and that just was so terrible. So basically the thing with Althea is that not only she wants to be a war sword, but she kind of has this like fate stone that she wears. When she gets it, she basically is sentenced to death, and she is only given a certain amount of time to live. And there's this solution in there, I guess you could say, that I just did not like. And then also I feel like, again, a big war wrapped up really quickly. I'm noticing a lot of patterns in these books. No wonder a lot of them I don't like their endings, because of the fact that, again, female character regressed on her character development, and also a lot of things got wrapped up really quickly, and I was just really, really disappointed with this book. And I think a lot of these could really use some re-ratings, because looking back on it now, I was being really nice with my ratings, to be honest. Like a lot of them I gave 4 stars to. I think I would like rate a lot of them at 3 stars, and maybe some of them like even at 2 stars, unfortunately, which makes me really sad. I think that this series is still worth the read, even though I think some of these series are not worth the read, but this one is definitely worth the read because I really like the world. I did really like the romance between Althea and Wilder Hawthorne, and when there's like a terrible ending for a book series, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and it just kind of ruins the whole entire series for me, to be honest, because then all I think is that, oh my gosh, it was such an incredible story, incredible characters, and then the ending was absolute trash. trash that like the characters deserve so much better. This was one of the worst endings. And now we're going to the top 3 worst endings I've ever read. So this might be a little bit controversial, but I know I'm not the only one who's disappointed. I picked up this book specifically instead of picking up the first book was because I love the first 2 books in the Crescent City series. This one was absolute trash. I hate being mean about these book series because a lot of these authors are my favorite authors of all time. But Crescent City, again, is like one of my least favorite SJM series, first of all, because I don't really like the whole entire characters of it. This was like one of the worst because, again, it focused way too much on other characters that I didn't give 2 craps about. Granted, this book is not technically the ending for this whole entire Crescent City series. Apparently she's gonna write 2 more books, 1 more book, something like that, where it's gonna be following another character. I think we're gonna be following Therion. This is an urban fantasy. We follow a character named Bryce, and she unfortunately goes through a tragedy at the beginning of the book. She is a fae. There's like werewolves and vampires, and I forget what else is in here, like shapeshifters, I think, if I remember correctly. I know there's mermaids for sure, because Therion is a mermaid. The first book was sort of like a murder mystery kind of like story. We meet our main character. I think a lot of people were disappointed in this book because the things that were shown in the second book and the development that we saw in this book for that plot point was so disappointing to a lot of people. I think, first of all, I think a lot of people went on with different theories of things that they were guaranteed was going to happen because of different like foreshadowing stuff in the book, or different like things that the character said, or the things that SJM wrote in here, like Easter eggs and stuff. And they were expecting for something else to happen, yet it didn't. And so those theories that everyone was like really hopeful that was going to happen was kind of like really out of left field, because she didn't even really guarantee that it was going to happen anyways. There's nothing in here that was like guaranteeing that these mixture of characters was going to turn out a certain way. And of course it didn't, and it disappointed a lot of people. That first off, like I went into it with like low expectations because I knew a lot of these theories were going to be proved wrong. I knew that whole entire beginning part was going to be disappointing, and I was feeling certain feelings about certain characters, how they were treating each other, that really pissed me off. And also I did not like how Bryce was in this book. Again, another female main character that was like regressed in her character development. And like I said, this is not technically the ending of the Crescent City series, but it is the ending for like the story arc of Hunt's and Bryce's story arc. I don't think it's going to be in their POVs anymore. They're probably going to still be in the story, but not focused on as much. So we'll probably be hearing about like what they're doing, stuff like that. But this one is, it looks like it's going towards different characters instead. And also, like I said, the character development in this book went out the window, and I just feel like the way Bryce treated Hunt was like a whole entire like second-rate citizen. She disregarded the things that he was talking about and the trauma he experienced. This was the worst for me. And also, since like technically it hasn't ended, yeah, but for me, I feel like the story has ended. I am not too sure if I'll ever pick up another Crescent City series, because Therion, he annoyed me too. The way he went about like trying to find help for his situation was so bad, and he inadvertently, like because of his choices, led other people down certain paths, and because of the choices he made, because of that, it was just like terrible for other characters, and he was being so selfish. And I do not want to follow a book about him unless he has like a huge character development. It was just like not it for me, and I wish this was like written so much better, especially with all the build up that we were getting. And then the second to last worst ending, I think everyone knows this story at this point, but Twilight had literally one of the worst endings I've ever read in my whole entire life. I'm not really too worried about spoiling stuff for Twilight because most people either know the story or heard about the story or watched the movies. This one, I'm obviously not going to give detailed spoilers, but if there's like mentions of things in here and you don't want to hear about it, obviously click out. If you don't know and you don't know anything about Twilight, basically follow a teenager named Bella. She ends up going to this like a high school in Forks, Washington, where she meets up with these vampires called the Cullens, and she ends up falling in love with Edward. And there's this whole entire thing where they have this whole entire enemies against these werewolves that is led by this other teenager named Jacob. His whole entire like clan is a werewolf, and so he ends up falling in love with Bella too. And there's this whole entire twisted, terrible triangle, the worst love triangle ever, and also the worst like depiction of like the most cringiest vampires ever. There's so many iconic memes out there that if you've never seen, I don't know what part of the internet you're on, or if you're on the internet at all, but the fact that you were able to miss any of these memes is like hilarious. The last book, oh my my gosh. I think the whole entire thing that ruined it for me was the whole entire Jacob imprinting on Renesmee for me. I thought that was terrible, and the way that Stephanie Meyer tried to explain how imprinting was, no, absolutely not. Because the whole entire time we knew from like an example that was shared in like the clan that Jacob is a part of, that basically imprinting turns into like love and these people falling in love with each other. And the fact that Renesmee was a kid and Jacob was an adult at that point just icked me out. It icked me the freak out, and I can't, ooh. But I did like the ending for Edward and Bella, but their whole entire beginning where it's like after their marriage, the honeymoon part, after all of that and said, this is not the worst ending I've ever read, because there's this one other book series that I read last year that really pissed me off with the ending. I think the reason why it's number one is because it's such a recent series for me, and also I loved every single one of the first books and I gave every single one of them 5 stars besides the last one, and that is the Legacy series by Melissa K. Rourke. This one, I love the first 3 books. We follow a character named Tessa. She is a fae, and in this world, faes are meant to be sort of like slaves to the legacy. Legacies are like descended from gods or whatever. They are like strongest, and like they're half gods or descended from gods, mixed blood with gods, whatever. I guess like sorting ceremony, what is it called? Choosing ceremony? I forget. I don't know. I'll pop it up on the screen if I remember. Legacies need sources to replenish our powers. Their well of power is not endless. Once they reach the end of it, they need to find a way to replenish it, and in order to do that, they need to bond with a source, which are the faes. They have no choice to become a source, and they have no say in the matter. They are chosen, and Tessa never ever wanted to be a source. In fact, she wanted to be blended in the background, but Theon ends up choosing her because of a chance meeting that they have. It's basically Theon and also Tessa like fighting tooth and nail against each other, against his source bond. She doesn't want it, and it was so good, the first 3. It's a part of like this whole entire universe of Melissa K. Rourke, in case you don't know, writes, where all of them are like sort of in the same universe but all in different worlds. So the Legacy series is like sort of after the Lady of Darkness series, and people ask if you need to read the Lady of Darkness series before Reign of Shadows and Endings. The Legacy series, you do not, because there's nothing really connecting to it besides like maybe some characters popping in here. The only thing that I would suggest is that if you want to have a more fully fleshed out explanation of the world, and also if you don't want any spoilers for some of the characters appearing from Lady of Darkness, because you wouldn't honestly know what ended up happening to them when they appear. The world is so fleshed out. The whole entire thing about like the chaos universe and the way like certain things are trying to be eradicated, because the faes have been suppressed all their lives. They've been used as slaves, like I said. They've been used as people's sources and entertainments and treated poorly, and Tessa just wants to lead these faes out of here and just stop them from being mistreated by these legacies. It's a dark fantasy, so if you do end up picking this up, which I don't think you should, read the first 3. You don't need to read the conclusion whatsoever, but it is a dark fantasy. Check your trigger warnings. There are really a lot of like dark stuff that happens, and the way it ended, I was so pissed off about. Okay, so the thing about me is that if there is a direction, like a trope kind of used for a romance that I don't particularly like, say that it's going to end up that way, because I need to know, because I don't particularly like this trope. It kind of ended up, I don't know if I should say it or not, because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. I'll just say that it ended up in a direction that I did not want it to, and I wish we were warned at the beginning of the series so that I could have avoided it myself. The way Tessa was so terrible. She's one of the worst FMCs of all time. She acts like a child. She is so impulsive, which is the whole entire point. The way she has grown up, the trauma that she has makes sense for why she's acting a certain way, but I was hoping Melissa would spend more time character development, because I was trusting the process, and the process I should not have trusted in. The ending was absolutely terrible. Like, why? You took away all these character developments for it to end up that way. Just really pissed me off. And also there's this huge war that we were like kind of building up on. Like I said, the faes were trying to get their rights back, and I was so ready for the conclusion, and it wrapped up in like 10 pages. Like, what was that? If I could expunge that ending from my brain, I would. Like, all the character development that Theon had, all the character development that I was assuming that Tessa was going to have. And there's another character in here named Luca, who was a part of this whole entire thing too. His character development was not there. He was just included to be included. And then also the only people who saved it for me is the side characters. And oh my gosh, guys, I hated the ending of this book. And I've never ever been that disappointed in a book series in my whole entire life. Everything else was just disappointing, but yet I could live. This one I still think about and remember how much I hated it, and I don't know if I ever will reread this whole entire series because it was such a close to a god tier series for me. I was so close to naming it a god tier series, it just depended on the last book. I gave it a 3.75. Looking back at it now, I would have given it 2 stars, so take that as you will. And that was my number 1 most disappointing ending for a series. But anyways, if you hung with me, friends, thank you. I just wanted to get these rants off my chest, and I really hope you're not too offended, especially if some of these series are your favorite, because a lot of them are my favorite too. They wouldn't be on this list if they weren't disappointing to me, but take it with a grain of salt. Anyways, if you want more videos like this, like and subscribe. It really does help my channel a lot, and I'll see y'all next time, friends. Bye!